Torah tells us the Yova Avram lispod l'sora v'livkoso. He came to eulogize her, and then he cried for her. I mean, seemingly, if God forbid such a tragedy happens to a person, especially in terms of the relationship that Avram had with Sarah, literally it was his partner in every aspect of his life. The moment he hears that she died, he cries immediately. But the Torah tells us first he eulogized her, v'livkosa, and he cried after eulogizing her. Seemingly, the crying precedes the eulogy. But yet the Torah tells us, no, first he was lisposa, and then he was livkosa. First he eulogized her, then he cried. Initially, he cried. He feels his life has now, he has this hole in his heart. He feels a loss which is not comprehensible. Where am I? What am I? I no longer have what I had before. But in terms of articulating, reflecting, understanding what exactly it is, of course he understands it. But in terms of in his mind to understand what is no longer. It's not his wife is no longer. His wife, who she was, is no longer. And the hesped is he's articulating and specifically speaking about every aspect of who she was and what her value was. And when you internalize and reflect on her innate value, it's a different level of crying. That's the point. I'll give you an example. There's a mitzvah when a person, God forbid, is sitting Shiva, and people make this mistake to speak about the deceased. And the one who's sitting Shiva is not supposed to be distracted to think about other things, to take his mind off his loss. The mitzvah of Shiva is to grieve over the lost one. When people come and speak to the person who's sitting Shiva, and they speak about, and the one who's sitting Shiva speaks about his lost one, his loved one, and people share stories and interact, that interaction, although it's painful, but simultaneously, it's expressing, and I'm not even talking about the therapeutic aspect of it. I'm talking about the actual effect on the person when he speaks about, and he reflects, like we had earlier, the Malachim asked Avram Avinu, Ayisar Ishtecha, where's your wife? And the Torah tells us, he shomas from Pesach, she's standing behind the door. A woman of Sari Menu's dimension of personality. She's a woman who was humble. She stayed behind the scenes. She wasn't out there in the forefront when the angels were there. Why did they ask that question? Lahagid Avram shetznu, that Avram should realize his wife is modest, how modest she is. Why Avram didn't know his wife was modest? Of course he knew, but when you point it out and you hear it, it resonates at that moment. One is like abstract and one is reality. But he knew it, of course he knew it. When they told him, it's like you have a son who's special. And everybody says, I met your son, he's really special. You know your son is special, but every time somebody mentions it to you, it touches you again in that certain way, which evokes a certain type of feeling about your special son. It's the same idea. When you speak about the person, especially in detail, and present it as a person should in a hesped, it's a different type of crying afterwards. That's the point. Okay. Now, we once spoke about the kaf, livkosa. In the word livkosa, he cried for it, the kaf is small. So the Balaturim explains, why did he, the Chav indicates there was a minimization of crying. He didn't fully cry as if he could have cried. So one interpretation, he says, let's say a person has a mother and she passed away at 103. Of course, there's a loss, there's a feeling no longer. But you understand, the person didn't die a young woman. The mother was 103 years old. So, of course, there's a degree of pain. So, because Sari Menu was 127, therefore, he cried less for her. It wasn't a crying that a person would normally cry for a younger wife. That's the first interpretation of Al-Turim. The second interpretation is like this. We find that when Hagar acted disrespectfully to Avram, when she didn't give the respect she deserved, and Avram didn't intercede and say anything to Hagar, Sarai Menu said to Avram, Chamosi Olecha, I have a claim against you. Chamosi, my anger is directed towards you. If you see that our maidservant is abusing me or not acting respectfully, you should have reined in on her. So I have a claim against you. So the Gemara tells us in Rosh Hashanah, when she said that, whoever's Mosed Din al Chavero, a person who speaks to Hashem, making a claim against somebody else, taking them to judgment, this activates Midas Din on the person himself. If you think you're so special and so perfect, and therefore you have a right to have a claim against someone else and bring it before Hashem, evidently you must be pretty confident and sure that your record is pretty perfect. So because she said to Avram Avinu, Chamosi Alecha, this activated a Midas Adin on what? On Sarah herself. And that's the reason why she passed away early. That's the Gemara. It's Gemara Rosh Hashanah. So he says over here, Inami shoysa kamo geremes misosa shemoshe d'adin. Alkein nensha hitchilo. And that's the reason why she was punished first. But mabed atzvul adas emaspidin also. It's like, God forbid, a person causes his life to be taken, one doesn't eulogize that person. So as a result of that she was partially responsible for her own premature death, therefore that's the reason why, and Avram knew this, therefore Avram didn't fully cry as he could have cried, because she was partially responsible for what happened over here. Okay? Not going to discuss it, but it's a Gemara. He's quoting the Gemara, the Malature. But I always mention the Ksaf Sofer. Probably, Alan, you remember the Ksaf Sofer. The Ksaf Sofer explains it this way. Avram was coming from the Akeidah, and as Rashi had said, why does there juxtapose the passing of Sora to the Akeidah? To tell us that it was due to the Akeidah, that's why Sarai Menu, that's why she passed away early, because the son came to her and said to her, do you realize where your son is now? Do you realize what your husband's doing to your son? He has him bound hand and foot, and he has a knife, and he's going to. And he didn't even finish the sentence. He didn't say he didn't slaughter him, but he's just saying up to that point. So she already played out the conclusion that her son was no longer alive. At that moment, she couldn't deal with it, and she expired at that moment. That's Rashi cites the Chazal. Now, where is Avram coming from at this point? It's coming from the Akeidah. What was the Akeidah? The Akeidah was the ultimate level that this guarantees till the end of time, whenever there's prosecution against Klal Yisrael, this will guarantee the eternal survival of Klal Yisrael. The Zechus of the Akeidah will silence the prosecution, regardless of what it is, against Klal Yisrael. That's how valuable the Akeidah. That's why the Satan, the worst way, tried to prevent Avram from going to the Akeidah, tried to prevent him. As it says, he came in as a raging river. And even at the end, when he wanted to actualize his intent, and the idol, which God created from Ben Hashmoshes at beginning creation, that's how valuable this action was. That had to be that special ram. Satan tried to somehow intervene and not allow the idol to come. That's what the Torah tells us it was caught in the thicket. And Avram took it from the thicket and brought it in the place of Yitzchak ibn Beno. And as Rashi said, every aspect of that avoda, when he slaughtered, this should be the equivalent of my son being slaughtered, my son being burnt, and so on and so forth. And that actualized it to set it in place forever till the end of time to be our Zechus. So what's Avram's emotional mental state when he's coming back from the Akeidah? He's at a level of ecstasy, exhilaration, that what he achieved now, he guaranteed the eternal survival of Klal Yisrael. Regardless of how badly we fail, and we deserve to be destroyed due to the prosecution of Satan, we have what to silence him forever. And that's the reason why we have the Akeidah. on Rosh Hashanah, we blow from the Shofar Shalayil, and therefore we speak about the Kriya of one of the days. We speak about the Akeidah. Everything's the Akeidah. Zohar Abris. When we speak about Zechronos, we speak about Hashem remembers the bris, and we speak about the Akeidah. He remembers what happened with Yitzchak. So he's at a level emotional ecstasy. Now he comes and he finds out his wife died. As a human being emotionally charged at that level, as much as a person would like to come down and fully internalize what it is, it's not possible. It's only because what preceded this moment was the Akeidah, therefore that didn't allow him to cry as a person normally would have cried if it wasn't preceded by the Akeidah, by such a special event, which is more than his own lifetime. It's the ultimate event in existence to be able to achieve what he was able to achieve. That's how the Ksaf Sofer explains it. Therefore, the Kaf is small to indicate that he wasn't able to cry as a person normally would have cried. That when the greatest of the 10 martyrs who were killed by the Romans was Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva was being tortured and being literally butchered to death. His students, his Talmidim were witnessing it, and they were crying. So Rabbi Akiva says to them, why are you crying? Don't you realize my whole life I was waiting for the moment that Hashem would give me the opportunity to fulfill, to express my love, even when it means to give my life. And finally, now I've come to it. This is the greatest moment of my life. I'm able to achieve a level of Avas Hashem b'chol nafshecha. Therefore, there's no reason to cry. I mean, his students didn't understand this. Reb Akiva is speaking from his vantage point, and his students are crying from their vantage point. Factually, one moment of Reb Akiva's Torah had such value, as it says, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, what was Reb Akiva's greatness? He was Oka Horim V'Tochen Zubazu. His genius was at a level he was able to uproot mountains, intellectually uproot mountains, and grind them together, to literally get to the depth and breadth of whatever the subject matter was. That's Reb Akiva. Reb Eliezer ben Hurkanus said to Reb Akiva that the Torah which I didn't teach, you're held accountable for not coming to learn from me, because you're the only one who had the capacity to understand what the Torah had to give over. And because you didn't come, that Torah is lost forever. So Reb Akiva had a capacity, is one of a kind. So the Talmidim, the students, when now they see Reb Akiva's life coming to an end, why are they crying? They understand what Reb Akiva is accomplishing for himself, but in terms of where they left, they're left abandoned, bereft, that they no longer have that special Rebbe to teach them and share that level of Torah with them. But in terms of Rabbi Akiva, in terms of what he's achieving, the mitzvah Kiddush Hashem, where Hashem says, despite your greatness in Torah, sanctifying my name has greater value than all your Torah. So Rabbi Akiva, he's ecstatic. So from his vantage point, he's ecstatic. From the student's vantage point, they're left bereft, because that Torah will never be available to them ever again. It's the same idea. So although they know what Reb Akiva is achieving, it has nothing to do with what, with their crying, this unceasing crying, that this unlimited level of pain. So the same, Avraham Avinu understood where Sarah was going. But in terms of the void, what he no longer has, that's just a reality in his life.
Rabbi.
The Gemara tells that if one wants to do a mitzvah and something intervenes and interferes, he's not able to conclude the mitzvah, but he would have done the mitzvah, he's fully credited for the mitzvah.
Right.
So over here, he wanted to slaughter his son. The Malach says, withdraw your hand. Don't do anything to the lad.
Right.
So why did the Malach have to tell? He says, don't do anything. So Rashi says, let me just make a small cut. Not even do the avoda. Me actualize whatever my intent was, to actualize it, to take it from the abstract and bring it to the reality. So the Malach says nothing, do nothing. Leave him unblemished. And all of a sudden, the ram appears. Meaning, taking it from the abstract, well, you're fully accredited for it. But when you actually actualize it in action, that means it becomes more of a reality. The ram, his feelings and his intent to be actualized, because it says he slaughtered it b'makom yitzchak b'no, in the place. Every aspect of the avod he did to that ram, it would have been actualized in Yitzchak. Hashem says, no, it's being actualized in the ram as if it would be Yitzchak.
My question is, what if you didn't do the ram? You still would have gotten accredited, no?
It wouldn't have the same value. It's going down for time immemorial on record that Yitzchak, it's considered, we find in the Tochacha, it says, Zocharti es Yaakov es Yitzchak, Zocharti es Avram. We find Zechira mentioned, I will remember the merit of Yaakov, the merit of Avram. It doesn't say the merit of Yitzchak. It says, I remember Yitzchak. Right? It says Yitzchak, doesn't remember. So Rashi over there cites Chazal, because Yitzchak is Afro shel Yitzchak tzarva lefonov. The ash of the Yitzchak is piled before God's eyes. Remember means it's not here, I have to recall. There's some degree of recalling. Yitzchak is before God's eyes. Afro shel Yitzchak, the ash of Yitzchak is piled before God's eyes. There's no ash. Yitzchak was never slaughtered, was never burnt. Right. The answer is the ram that was brought in his place, because Avram actualized every aspect of his feeling as if it was Yitzchak. It's as if Yitzchak was sacrificed and burnt, and therefore the ash of Yitzchak is before God's eyes for that reason.
I'm sorry, this is incorporated in you clicked out for a second, at least on my thing.
The Rosh Hashanah Musaf, and the Rosh Hashanah davening.
Yeah, in Musaf.
In Musaf, and it says that the remembrance of
Zechronos and Zechronos.
Yeah. And Zechronos, to remember it.
And so it does not mention the remembrance of Yitzhak.
That's in Bechukosai. When God says, I will remember the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It says, remember in terms of Yaakov, in terms of I remember in terms of Avram, doesn't the word remember in terms of Yitzchak. So Rashi immediately cites the Midrash. Why doesn't it remember? Because God doesn't have to remember Yitzchak. Because Yitzchak, the ash of Yitzchak is before God's eyes. The connotation remember means you have to some degree of recall. Yitzchak, there's no recall. It's right before God's eyes.
And why don't we ascribe even greater merit to Yitzchak? Right? They were partners in this. Right? There's the whole discussion about there's no way that Abraham could have bound him. He must have been voluntarily. When Abraham's going to be the survivor, Yitzchak's really the one that was. I would have thought that Yitzchak, obviously it's incomprehensible for a father to kill his own child, but Yitzchak was actually, in theory, supposed to die.
Okay. If you remember, we had said, what exactly were the tests? And this is explicit in the Midrash. What was the test of the Akeidah? Should Avram kill his son or not kill his son? That wasn't the test. The test was
the inconsistency between you're gonna.
He did not ask the question. His level of negation to Hashem, that was the test. If that's the case, it has nothing to do with Yitzchak agreeing to be slaughtered or Avram slaughtering. God says slaughter, that's not the issue. Yitzchak being told that God said being slaughtered, Yitzchak had no issue.
No, but I would assume that.
But I'm just saying that wasn't the test. For Yitzchak, Avram, that wasn't the test.
But either one could have asked the question.
No.
Because assuming that Abraham passed that down to Yitzchak, that you were going to be the propagator of the future Klal Yisrael, Yitzchak could have easily said, how's this going to work?
Okay. There's a difference if you hear that Yitzchak never had the communication from God. It's like it's like third party. Abraham had the direct communication. When a person has a communication as a prophet, as the Rambam says, it's the way explained, in reality of life, there's nothing more absolute than a prophecy. Because a prophecy is not through the human faculty, it's directly to the soul. So it was a level of absoluteness, which is nothing compared to that absolute. All of a sudden, with an absoluteness, it's to the contrary of that. To be able to deal with that, it's only if there's a total negation. And that was the test. To what degree are you negating to Hashem? Not even to ask for some reading on it, a reconciliation between the two statements. That was Avram's issue. And that was the test that was presented to him. Otherwise, you're right. I mean, Yitzhak, if it was, do you allow yourself? He was an adult. He could have actually refused to be bound. His father was 137. He's a young man. He's 37 years old. Okay.
Rabbi, just getting back to the class.
We read in the Parsha that Avram sent Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzhak. And Eliezer questioned, maybe the woman's not going to want to come back. I have a daughter, all the back and forth between Avram and Eliezer. Avram says, Hashem will send his angel, you will find that wife on behalf of my son. How is he so sure? And he knew exactly where to find that wife, who's the future matriarch of Klal Yisrael. He'd say, well, you know, he had faith, he had trust in Hashem. The answer is, it's much more than that. What does it say right after the Akeidah? It says that Avram was informed that his brother Nochar had a granddaughter born to him. And who was it?
Rivka.
Rivka was born to Besuel. That was because he asked the question, now that my son is alive, who's he going to marry? Immediately it was communicated to him, Rivka was born. So he knew that Rivka, that his soulmate, the future matriarch, is waiting there. He knew a fact. Eliezer, he didn't share this with Eliezer, but he set the prerequisites. Who is that woman? Without telling who she was. So Avram understood everything. Avram understood that Sarah had to be buried in the Mars Machpelah. That's why it was called Kiryat Arba, because the four couples, Adam and Chava was buried there, and he understood exactly why it had no value, because all the demons were there, and people couldn't even go in there, as I mentioned yesterday, that your life would be in jeopardy if you'd walk in there and you would die, only to protect the location, because it's exclusive to these four couples. Avram said, it's not a question there's a question whether I'll be able to purchase it or not. He knew everything was set in place. He eulogized us. I just have to go through the motion. Or from the right amount of money, whatever it is, it's a done deal. That's Avram. If the funeral would have been delayed for weeks because he'd have to locate it and all that, you're right. He would have first attended to that and then eulogized afterwards. Here, it's just a question of going through the motions. He eulogized it, and not only that, because people would appreciate who Sari Menu was by sharing many things during the eulogy, the people themselves would act on his behalf to make sure the deal is done, that he succeeds in the negotiation. Because it says the Bnei Ches originally they communicated Avram's interest in purchasing the Mars Machpelah, right? Bnei Ches. And he's speaking to the Bnei Ches.
So there's some subtle pressure being put on Ephron to make sure that he does the right thing, per se.
Ephron has no pressure. Ephron made Avram pay a pound of flesh plus for this thing.
Well, he may not have wanted to transact at all.
He wanted this. Initially, he speaks like he's a tzaddik. Consider it yours. It's my honor and privilege to even as
I'm saying he may not have wanted to cede the property at all, right? And then
according to Chazal, it was worthless. It was toxic wasteland where you couldn't go near it. And now this fanatic Avram, who has all this money, he's willing to pay anything for it. You know something? As I said yesterday, a sucker is born every day. He's waiting for this person to come down the road. Avram is willing to. Well, you want to pay it? You're going to pay. But he took advantage of Avram. He believed he took advantage of him, but he didn't understand what Avram understood.
But I think Mark's point is that Abraham knew how important this was for the Jewish people forever. He wasn't taking any chances at all. He's going to get the people behind him to make sure that no matter what, that Ephron's going to give him this land at whatever cost. He's going to just everything's got to be lined up because he knew how important it was. So
Well,
it's a very important point, Rabbi, that he got the people behind him.
Of course, originally,
Yeah.
you have to read through the psukim. Originally, he asked them, I want that location. They said, it's our honor. You're a prince of God. Whatever you want, consider it yours. That's how we responded.
He understood
But
Ephron.
Avram said, I don't take this gratis. I'm willing to pay for it. I'm willing to pay. Consider it as if the money's in the bank. That's what he said to him. Of course, he didn't want him at all. See, he indicated to Ephron his interest and his desire that he's willing to pay anything for this. So when Ephron understood where Avram was coming from, he took advantage of the moment. Although on the market it had no value, this location had no value whatsoever, as the psukim read.
Rabbi,
1 second. V'yokem Avram me'alpnei meso, v'yidaber al bnei ches lemor. After he finished eulogizing, he rose from the presence of his mess, of his deceased, and he spoke to bnei ches. So over here, the Sefarno says, a person is an onain. Onain is the state before the burial. Once the person's interred, the person's called a ovel. An ovel is not supposed to be distracted once he's in the shiva period. So he explains, Shlochol olav avelus adayim. Before the interment, he's not an ovel yet. Therefore, he's able to negotiate and do whatever he has to do. Therefore, he was able to negotiate this and line up the people to represent him for this purchase. Over here, the Balaturim says, Yud Tomim b'nei Ches beparsha. B'nei Ches in this parsha mentioned 10 times. Why? V'shemavare mecho shel Talmud Chochem kilu kiim aser sadibros. A person who goes and facilitates the purchase of a Talmud Chochem, it's like he's fulfilling the aser sadibros. The purchase, he says. Shamavare mecho shel Talmud Chochem kilu kiim aser sadibros. Quotes the Medrash. Sheish b'hem yud pomim ches. Ches is mentioned 8 times, 10 times. Ches b'nei ches. Ephron Yoshe b'soch b'nei ches. Ephron is sitting among the sons of Ches. V'yan Ephron. Ephron responds. They are the intermediaries. V'yafron Ephron lachiti. Es Avram be'oznim b'nei ches l'chol boy shar iro lemor. He's making this statement in a public setting. L'chol boy shar iro lemor. Lo Adoni, not as you say, my master. He's referring to Avram as his master. Shmo'eni, listen to me. Hasod asati loch. Consider it as if the field was already given to you. And the cave, which exists in that field, also consider as if it's been given to you. And I'm giving to you in this public setting, so I should not be able to renege. It's public knowledge at the most public level for Mesecha. Bury you dead. Okay? I will fulfill your request and consider it's done. It's a done deal. And I'm doing it in a way that it will never be questioned in the future because I'm doing it in a public setting. Okay? Now, the word Ephron Yoshev is written, the Vav is deleted, right? In Yud. So Rashi over here cites, like we had earlier, Avram Yoshe Pesach Oel, when he was sitting at the entrance waiting for guests to come. So Rashi over there says, it's without the vowels, it's written Yoshav. He sat. He wanted to stand, and Hashem says, no, you sit. Yoshav means, if you take Rashi, Siv Choser. Ose Yom Minu Shoter Aleim. At the day that Avram had to negotiate with Ephron, he was appointed for a public office. Shoter, he was like a magistrate. Because Avram needed him, it would have been inappropriate for Avram to purchase it from an ordinary person. So he took on a level of stature because of Avram. It would have been inappropriate for Avram to deal with an ordinary person. See, he was raised to a level of stature for the sake of Avram. This is Ephron. L'chol bo shar iro, shekulam botul milachton, well, legal chesed l'sor, I mentioned before. This was the whole community was there at this funeral. So when he eulogized them, everything was, she was a world-renowned figure, sorry, Meir. V'yedaber el Ephron, Yud Beis. Bozne b'nei ches lemor. He spoke to Ephron in the presence of the Meches, that they could fully be aware of the nature of this conversation. Ach atolo shmeini. I want you to listen to me. Nosati kesef hasode kach mimeni. Consider it as if I already gave the money for the field. Take it from me, vekras mesi shama, and bury my dead there. So over here, there's an interesting Orach Chaim HaKodesh. This Ephron was such a conniving person. We had, the Gemara says in Bava Basra, we discussed, if a person is forced to sell something under coercion, and the buyer and the seller doesn't say, I agree, and you don't pay an appropriate price for it. That level of coercion, although the person says yes, if the person wasn't compensated minimally for what he expected, it's not a valid transaction. It's only under duress and the person said consents and he received an appropriate value, price for it, only then is the transaction valid. With all these accolades, the Sielo Kimato, you're Prince of God, this and that, and he does it in public, that everybody's aware, Ephron wanted that there should be a sale which is under coercion. Then later he should be able to undo the sale. So Avram says, I don't want it. I'm not asking you for any gift here. I don't want you to feel it's not under coercion. Consider the money in the bank, everything else. So everything Ephron tried to undermine the validity of the transaction, Avram was addressing every aspect of that, and therefore he offered a fortune in advance that it's due to the money. It's not due to his status as a prince of God. That everybody should know this is not under coercion. That Ephron received, at first he said he was giving it away, considered it as a gift. Why should you give it to me as a gift? That means initially he says you're not paying for it. The money is a secondary issue. Avram says, no, I'm paying for this and I don't want it for any other reason other than I'm purchasing it. So whenever Ephron tried to say things which would question the validity of the transaction, Avram addressed it, considered it, the money was given already. Even before you even said you would give it to me as a gift, I want nothing gratis. It's only because I'm paying, that's why I'm taking possession of this property. And I'm willing to pay anything you ask. As a result of that, this secured the deal that it's unquestioned, that this is fixed in stone forever. Now, over here, Tezvav, Adoni Shwaini, Eretz Abrameus Shekel Kesabeni Veitcha Mahi. First, he's giving it away for nothing. Then he says, and what's my master? What's 400 silver talents between both of us? What is it? It's a pittance for you. That's basically Kfor. Okay? Vayishma Avram el Ephron. Vayishkov Avram leEphron es hakesef. Avram weighed out to Ephron the silver. Ashedibe bos neches. Arba shekel kesef ovela socher. Now, if you notice, Ephron is written in its full spelling until Vayishkov Avram leEphron es hakesef. The vav is deleted. Ephron had such an evil eye. He was so envious of Avram. When he saw the level of wealth that Avram had, the envy was literally all-consuming. He had an ayin hora. The numerical value of Ephron without the vav is ayin ra. Ayin ra. Ephron over here could have done it with a full heart, without envy, but despite everything, understanding who Avram is, it's only because he was envious of what what Avram had, his level of wealth. As I said, it's over the socher. It doesn't mean just ordinary 400 silver coins over here. It's a level of what the Gemara makes a calculation. Could have been millions of dollars he paid for this. And he saw Avram, but like the man is not normal. Who pays for toxic wasteland this kind of money? But it was due to his envy of Avram. Therefore, he asked for this kind of number. Therefore, Ephron is written choser, and the numerical value of Ephron without the vav is 400. Ayin Ra, which is also 400. And we find when Esav came with 400 men, why does Torah make it a point 400? Also, 400 is the numerical value of Ayin Ra. The level of Ayin Ra that Esav had towards Yaakov was the same intensity of Ayin Ra, the evil eye. He wanted to totally consume him. Okay. I'm going to stop here.